Hey guys, it's Destiny, and today I wanted to explain the fundamentals and basics of damage over time as a way to know how a character like Kafka, Sampo, and so on would operate, as well, of course, as our other damage over time users. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. To begin, I wanted to explain what damage over time is. Damage over time is what the name suggests, damage over time. This is when an enemy is inflicted with an element that will damage them once that enemy's turn arrives in combat. We've all seen it in Honkai Star Rail, where an enemy will be inflicted with elemental damage right as their turn begins, and this is what damage over time is. As for what damage over time exists, there is burn, shock, wind shear, and bleed from the respective elements fire, lightning, wind, and physical. Quantum, imaginary, and ice do not inflict damage over time, but rather a form of crowd control. The enemy will still take damage from these forms of crowd control, which can be considered delaying an enemy turn, and then they get hit with elemental damage once their turn begins. However, they are not considered damage over time like the other elements in the game. Lightning and burn last for a few turns and will damage the enemy each turn that passes until the DoT has ended. As for wind shear, it could be stacked up to 5 times, and bleed is based on enemies' health as well in comparison to our other forms of DoT. Some characters that inflict a form of DoT is Himiko, Hook, Sampo, Luca, Kafka, and Serval. However, any character that is lightning, wind, physical, or fire can inflict DoT through breaking the enemy. Break damage over time is different from natural damage over time that comes from a character's kit, and break DoT will also be based on your character's level, enemy level, and the break effect stat. Break DoT occurs when any ally breaks an enemy's toughness meter, and this is separate from normal DoT inflicted through a skill kit, and both can occur at the exact same time. For instance, if you attack an enemy with Sampo and inflict wind shear, and also break the enemy, you will have multiple cases of wind shear onto the enemy. Before we get into ways to improve your DoT damage, if you are enjoying so far, consider subscribing, and now let's carry on. There are a few ways to improve your DoT damage with your characters. The primary way is increasing your attack stat, as DoT scales with your character's attack, and this is important for dealing more DoT damage. The only exception is the slight cone, as it scales off of defense and can be used on preservation class characters. Another stat to keep in mind is effect hit rate, as most DoTs have a base chance to be inflicted onto the enemy. If you're looking at break DoTs, now you'll also need to consider break effect in order to deal more damage when you break an enemy with your DoT. Now, for ways to increase the damage within battle, you can lower enemy defenses, and this will allow your DoT to do more damage, and Pela and Silverwolf are great enablers because of this, as they can help damage over time. Damage dealers do more damage by lowering enemy defenses. Another thing to keep in mind when building your DoT characters is that DoT cannot crit. So most characters that focus on damage over time do not care about crit rate and crit damage if your main purpose is to primarily inflict damage over time and not do damage through their actual skill kit in relation to how much their skill does damage-wise in their ultimates. However, some characters can deal more damage, of course, through their skill, ultimate, and talent damage, such as Himiko and Hook, for example, and possibly even Serval. And as a result, they can benefit from crit rate and crit damage, so it ultimately depends on which character you're using. In Serval's case, she can go either the crit rate and crit damage, or she can actually go the break effect route as well. I think these characters are also pretty versatile in what you can choose to do with them. For Sampo, I would primarily focus on attack and effect hit rate, but once again, for a character like Himiko and Hook, you can possibly do a mix of break effect, crit rate, and crit damage, or just strictly go for one or the other. As for Kafka, she's a very unique character when it comes to damage over time, and is definitely worthy of having the title the Queen of DoT. Kafka is a character that can enhance damage over time as his playstyle in a brand new way through her skill kit, and her being able to detonate DoTs on enemies makes her an immensely powerful character and a good staple to have when it comes to damage over time teams. Kafka is able to detonate present damage over time on enemies and is able to detonate burn, shock, bleed, and wind shear. She is not able to detonate ice, imaginary, or quantum though, as mentioned before. Those are more so considered crowd control, and while entanglement and freezing an enemy does eventually hit them with damage, The difference is that they do not operate exactly the same as burn, shock, bleed, and wind shear as mentioned before. Amplifying Kafka's damage can be done in numerous ways, but the best ways I'd recommend is having another character on the team that can either increase her attack and damage potential, such as Tingyun or Asta for attack and speed, having a character that can decrease either enemy defenses or resistances, which a great option is Silverwolf for both, and defenses with Pela, and also characters that can alter enemies' vulnerability, which can be Sampo with his ultimate, or even our brand new DoT character, Luca, who can also inflict bleed onto enemies as well. All of these options can heavily assist Kafka in her damaging potential and allow your Kafka to do as much damage as possible as a result. Overall, I think damage over time is a quite interesting playstyle and definitely now became more prevalent with the release of our damage over time queen, Kafka. For those who aren't too sure about Kafka and her worth, based on my experience playing her, I definitely recommend her, especially for those who are interested in a damage over time playstyle overall, and damage over time will likely become stronger in the future as we get more characters. And I'm personally excited to test out and see the playstyle's potential to the fullest. And if you guys have any questions or thoughts on a damage over time playstyle, let me know in the comments down below. And also consider checking out my Kafka guide I released for more details on Kafka, which should be the previous video. Consider subscribing for more Star Rail content, leave a like as well to support the video, and like always, I hope you all have a nice one. Peace.